Hello, Cosmic Soul fam. Ella Ivy here, founder and creator of Livzenastrology. And I am here with an honored guest that has said yes to the dress and was called to have this conversation, this cosmic conversation as we are entering the solstice period. Astrologically, there's a lot happening. And before we get started, I want to introduce you to this divine, beautiful soul who I've known now for several years. Her name is Kristin Geeslin, and she is known as holistic. Okay, mindful seer. That's her brand. That is who she is. Is known her holistic self sovereignty system, B.E.I.S.M, intuitive development and mindfulness method. And I can't wait to go more into that and how you created that. That's really very interesting and exciting. Emergent leaders. She helps emergent leaders, healers, and seers move from confusion or chaos to clarity and satisfaction by applying this approach to awareness and action. So thank you so much, Kristin, for being here with your unique perspective. We were just talking about the unicorn. And so you have a unique perspective about health and healing and holistic wellness and what you do to help the collective. And I know you like to work with spiritual leaders. So let's just go into a little bit about your brand and B.E.I.S.M and how that came into be and how you use this download, this system to help other practitioners, other leaders.
Sure. That came out, the original B.E.I.S.M was my sort of life aspiration. All right. From the time I was a young person, coming into adulthood, I knew I wanted to try to live a body, mind, spirit life. I knew that was like a goal. How I was going to do that, who knows? So I was always interested in holistic health. I was always doing yoga, meditation, studying metaphysics, being deeply into Vajrayana Buddhism, all these different things. I studied theosophy when I was really young, all of the stuff that's the precursor to the manifestation secret Hicks business. There was a bunch of stuff that happened way back in the 30s for that. So I was I was formulating, it was sort of brewing and formulating and steaming and sifting things for many decades. And then I had Dark Night of the Soul in about 15 years ago when I went through the change and my gifts opened up more. My intuitive abilities opened more. They had been there, but they really came online more at that time. And so then I started doing, readings and consultations that were more intuitively focused and theta healing with people. And I noticed that, when I'm in a altered state of consciousness, we'll say slightly trance consciousness, I don't really remember what happens during that time, nor does sometimes the recipients of a reading or, some kind of guidance. They might not remember what happened either because everybody's slightly altered. Everybody's sort of out of the typical time-space continuum during those conversations. So I thought, well, being practical, being Virgo, I wanted there to be some kind of a structure so that when they were after the experience, they had things that were actionable. They had clear something to walk away with that they knew, okay, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'm going to, hold this in consciousness or shift my attitude. I didn't want it to just be, oh, that was an entertainment and a nice experience and I got an energy clearing. It's like, okay, good. I'm glad you had a positive time with me in that, sacred container. But what about after the sacred container? Because there's a lot more time after that. What are you going to do then? So that's when I started saying, how can I organize what we're going to discuss in a way that is true for me, that resonates for me, but would also, represent sort of how I've done things, but would also be sort of easy to remember. So I started playing around with body, mind, spirit, and it organized itself into B.E.I.S.M. So we're kind of traveling up the chakras with this. And then recently I've put a hyphen so people get that it's B-ism. And then each one of these, a letter stands for a different element going sort of up the chakra line. So the body is the physical body, where you live, and your cash, emotions, intellectual life, your spirit soul journey, and mastermind is the relationship with all that is. So this works both sort of for one-on-one consultations, but it's also part of my imagining the new Earth, where we have a federation, type organization, modeled after our delicious science fiction universe. That often comes true. When you follow science fiction, a lot of the stuff in science fiction does eventually come into being. To hold in consciousness a different way of thinking about who we are as human beings, to think about we're all human beings on planet Earth, and to think about the B.E.I.S.M as a way of connecting in the shared areas, so that we all have physical needs, emotional needs, intellectual, spiritual, mastermind. So I love diversity, and I love all of the little cultural nuances and different languages and all of those beautiful, intricate, lovely, expressions of the divine. But when they're taken to the point of identityism, that's when we run into conflicts and issues. If we are able to hold the sacredness of the beautiful differences at the same time, we hold in consciousness that really inside, this is a soul journey, and we're all, doing what we can to connect with the all that is, because that's what makes us feel alive, no matter what culture you're from or whatever. Everybody wants to feel that sense of connection. Then we can work backwards into solving those more basic issues, kind of in an easier way. So that's the B.E.I.S.M, sort of the long and the short of the B.E.I.S.M.
Well, just from my astrology community, what are your top three, your sun, moon, and rising, for those that are curious?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So my sun sign is Virgo, my moon sign is Sagittarius, and my rising sign is Leo. I also have 3 other planets in Virgo. So yes, I like to break it down and be very thorough and detail oriented, indeed. But I also, because I am a 4 psychic and medium with a lot of meditation time, I also sometimes just go completely into the perceptive, sensory, energetic awareness space. I'm not always in that, analytical thing. So,
Which is very interesting, because from an astrological point of view, we're actually at the nodal axis points of Virgo and Pisces, which tells me a lot about, especially with your B.E.I.S.M, because we've learned Virgo, which is our south node, and now we're here to learn Pisces, which is north node, which is that dissolving that you're talking about, right? So it's bringing structure so that we can release all the structure, right? It's like entropy, neg entropy, in a very interesting way. And we're all here to learn this Pisces, right?
Yes, exactly. We need a different kind of a structure, a more open, inclusive, spacious kind of a structure, instead of one that was so, time, space located.
Yes. Yes. Which we needed at that time, because time is created structure in our reality, right? That's how dimensions were created, through time. So we're an interesting time period. This is why it's a perfect time to have these type of conversations. And another thing that pinged me as you were speaking, that came in really clear, and maybe we can launch into this conversation with this, of how your gifts were initiated by the dark night of the soul, or a dark night of the soul, because I feel like we go through many. I know I've gone through many. And so collectively, humanity is going through a dark night of the soul. So could this mean too, since you are working with leaders and other, metaphysicians, if you will, who work with this type of energy, are you seeing maybe an expansion of more of psychic gifts, or more connection to spirituality, because of this dark night of the soul that humanity is all collectively going through, as we're, asking the questions of our mortality, what happens after we die? With COVID in 2020, that was an initiation point, that people were in the hustle and bustle and they didn't think about these things. But now we're moving to a space, especially with AI, making things a little easier, and changing the jobs and things that we do, that people are facing this dark night of the soul within them. So with your B.E.I.S.M, how can you see us as practitioners who've been kind of in this realm for a while, how humanity is approaching this, and how we can step up into our gifts and our sovereignty and leadership, for those that have been in this process for a while?
It's each person, their brand of leadership looks different. I mean, one of the things that I just don't do is cookie cutter. I just always I've spoken with so many people during my career, starting when I was 20 years old as a professional counselor or whatever. I think I do kind of a scanny kind of a thing. And then some people I get some information because of their types, whenever you listen to any of the people who are providing medical intervention right now, they'll say, okay, here's your issue. And now there's 4 types of people that, we'll break that into 4 main challenges, and I don't have it codified like that. But with the leaders, I feel like there's a lot of people who, in terms of, yes, definitely confirming more and more people turning on to or tuning into their psychic abilities. I mean, just the amount of chatter and conversation has expanded so drastically incredibly between 2016 is when I came out as a seer. And, so that's not that long ago. That's less than a decade. And when I first started talking about it, I wasn't even sure how to present myself on LinkedIn. I didn't want to lose credibility with the science side of the world, having training and credentials and all. I didn't want people to think I'd totally lost it. That's why I do still leave the MS, in my thing, because I want people, not everybody who's psychically gifted has been academically trained. It's kind of rare for those things to go together. So I wanted to keep all that. In terms of how I think the B.E.I.S.M helps leaders is a couple different things. I can say I've had some, like other metaphysical leaders. I can think of one right now who I've built sort of an interesting connection with. I feel like he's modeling some of the way I structure and present what I'm doing. Not necessarily, it's not a formal contract or anything with this guy, but it's somebody who recognized something about my energy and was drawn into it. And now when I see how he's presenting and doing a lot of what he does, we're both very holistic, very much body, mind, spirit. He's trained shamanistically and is very focused on health. So I think it's sort of, there was a trend for a while that was very focused on coaches doing a real narrow niche thing. And I know that's how people are sort of being encouraged to market and get your audience and all that. But I actually think the trend, okay, I actually think we're more of the, like, I don't know, the new earth lifestyle, if we were to say, okay, the new human, if we were to say, is a person who is thinking about all of these different elements of being on a day-to-day basis. And some of the way that I'm influencing other leaders is not formal. It's not in formal contracts. It's how I roll, it's how I present myself in social media. It's how I show up in my personal life. It's how I am when I'm at an event. It's sort of almost by transmission, by example and osmosis type of thing.
Your beingness.
My beingness, exactly. Okay, so it's transmitted that way. Now, yes, I have specific services and things that I offer, but yeah, much more feel like the beingness is something that people are becoming more aware of and care more about since COVID, of course, because when people started jumping off that treadmill and having the reflective time, they started to assess their own values. And a lot of people just wanted to downshift from the hectic pace. They wanted to, yes, let's keep working from home so we can do better work-life balance. I do have formal coaching programs where people work with me over time. I have transitioned one person who had a very high power professional career as a leader in a traditional role, who now has a coaching certification, but I really brought her out of the closet with her intuitive gifts. Like she really didn't have anybody for many years to share those things with. And she'd had intuitive stuff for decades. So I'm sort of feel like I've been making intuitive and psychic awareness normal.
Well, do you think also too, and again, speaking to the astrology, since we're here to learn Pisces, coming from this very structured, organized, methodical Virgo, right? And so what would you say to those beings who have spent many, many times getting their degrees, right? Being very much into that system, right? Systems, if you will, because
Yeah.
it's also Virgo, and helping people release and trust that it's we're moving beyond that now. It's
Right.
not
I
so
think it has to do with, just helping people move into awareness. Everybody's already kind of aware. Everybody's already sometimes knows when they're having a psychic hit or having an intuitive hit. It's just kind of creating space and holding space that it's okay. First of all, that it's okay. It's okay to move into that direction. It's okay to start really trusting it when you get that intuitive hit, or compare. How does it go when you do trust it? And how does it go when you don't? Sort of like in a more experimental way, not like, without judgment, just observation, just like, okay, let's just play with this and see what it's like to operate in a way. I call it, it's the S way, the spidey sense way. So we're moving out of knowing. So like for me, the universe put me in I don't know for a good 4 years. When after the dark night stuff went down, I really did not know where my life was going, what I was going to do, how I was going to make a living, who I was going to be. I was in a big I don't know, which was challenging because I'd been rewarded all my life for being smart and for, I was successful in the school kind of things, read, write, regurgitate, no problem there, very good at that. But I was placed, the universe almost, I feel deliberately placed me, and I don't know, because the work I do now requires the starting point of I don't know, because it's not about my I knowing, it's about my spidey sensing. It's about my openness to the all that is and sensing into what it's telling me for myself or for others. So, I remember like standing at my kitchen sink, looking out the window one day and thinking, oh, I live in a really different way now. Like after a couple of years of being in the I don't know, I started to become aware that I was being moved around the planet, and moved through my day in much more of an energy sensing way than I had ever before. Not that I don't plan or structure things, but in all of the free space, any place that doesn't already have a committed time signature on it, I am very much just flowing around, feeling around, sensing around, getting, like you, getting some messages, some things coming in. And it just makes life more, to me, more alive, more rewarding, more interesting. It keeps me aware that this little Kristin avatar is time limited, and helps me not be so attached to the minutia of a day, the good, the bad, and the ugly of any particular day, because I'm thinking more regularly in terms of this big cosmic play, and I'm just in the Kristin avatar for 5 more minutes,
So it's almost like what I'm sensing too is you stepped into the I don't know, into the well, I don't know, but I trust.
Exactly. At first, it was a little scary indeed. And then gradually it started to be like, oh, this isn't so bad. I kind of dig this. This is kind of cool to hang out in the I don't know, in the preconceived, because when we're in the I know, that's conditioned reality. That's things that we are set up a certain way based on prior experience. When we go to I don't know, now we're in an open state, and we can reprogram or reevaluate, rewrite, make a new script, download different software. And so we need both. We need some structure, so we need some I know, but that I knowness for me is something that's continuously in review, because there's parts of it that may be true at a certain point in time, but then because we're in a new time, their trueness diminishes. And then we have to find, I like to find, because I'm a truth seeker, what resonates as true, in this the new now. Yeah.
It's interesting. I received a download about that, that at that moment in time and space, that's why all reality is real, because at that moment in frequency and time, it was real. But then when you shift energies or cymatics or, then it's not real anymore. So this whole thing about what is real, what is truth, again, these are interesting concepts, but to ground it into, and why I was called to, again, I heard invite Kristin into this conversation because we have this approaching solstice energy on June 21st. And astrologically, our ancestors made huge monolithic structures to point to these pivotal moments in time and space and consciousness.
Right.
So as we're transcending time, as we're moving from this very, Virgo structured, methodical, linear perspective into transiting more Pisces, right? Feeling, stepping into, I know what I know, but I don't know what I don't know, and I'm okay with it, but I trust that the knowing will appear to me when it's time, and I'll have a coherent experience with it. You can call that in. And I found for me, it's making room in my nervous system to trust the process, because I realized too, there were certain traumas and things that wouldn't allow me to trust the I knowing or the beingness, right? The stepping into the, I'm just going to be present with the energy. So I think and I feel it's a process. So again, collectively, we're all going through this process of a dark night of the soul, if you will, and this approaching solstice energy, because we talked about Jupiter in Cancer, our planet of expansion, being in Cancer in terms of safety and security. So what would you recommend for those of us who are willing and are called to step into the unknown, but we still need to feel that safety, that structure? And how can we use this energy, this approaching energy, from what you see, a psychic point of view, and what you're feeling from the collective energies, how we can best navigate these unknowns with more faith?
Right. I like to think of the word sanity more than security. I think there's a lot of stickiness with the term security because there's a lot of preconceived ideas about what that might look like. Okay. And that is so just inconsistent. I mean, some people are completely secure living in a van. Other people need a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom house. I mean, that, it's so unique. So I think sanity is a word that, if you are able to be sane in your situation, then you are safe. And that for me, that sanity is much more of a thing, because to me, that's related to my calm centeredness and my regulated nervous system. I have faith and confidence that if I move from a regulated nervous system with some faith in the universe and myself, my choices aren't going to be too bad. They may not be perfect. All right. I may have to adjust. I may have to do course corrections, but they're not going to be way out of the pale. So I lived a life with a deregulated nervous system, seriously, for many decades. And I was very reactive. And finally, at some point along the way, I was like, when I'm upset, I can't think. And I pride myself in my creativity and my problem solving and my great knowingness and my resourcefulness. And I'm like, oh, dang, it just doesn't work if I'm too upset. I can't think. Oh, damn. So then I started to go sooner. I'd catch myself sooner in my, emotional deregulation and go, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to get more upset and it's going to take a day to recover your thing? Or what do you want to do about that? So fire, got a lot of fire. So, I mean, I'm happy to have the fire because I'm still really interested in a lot of things at 61. I don't see myself retiring kind of thing, no. But, early in life, all that fire was a lot to deal with.
So what do you recommend people do? How do you recommend people regulate their nervous systems so they can make space for this surrender, this, again, learning Pisces of not having to know where your resources.
Right. It's so different. Different people do it different ways. I love meditation and I have a formal meditation practice. And then I do sort of an informal meditation with the divine, with the nature and the birds and the frogs first. And then I do a formal meditation and I have things come to me in both places. So, the challenge, I will admit, is that I'm so busy wanting to be creative and put my hands on something. I have to really, really sacred mark those times. And I had gotten into not doing the morning part where I was outside with nature for a while. And it was very hard on me. I thought, oh my gosh, this isn't good. And I realized I have to keep that as a priority. The formal practices, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Holidays, it might be more. If I go retreat, it's on more. It's very flexible. I could count mantra in the car. Some people aren't into that. Some people just walk. Some people regulate their nervous system by an early walk in the morning and breathing. Some people, they need the water. They might go to the beach, or they go in the swimming pool, or they go in the bath or the shower. It just really depends on the person. What is, some people are music people, and they know if they go to their go-to music, they're going to reset. I found out recently, and I think I shared this with you, that the tweeting birds in the morning are actually reset your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Their frequencies are resetting. And apparently they do not chirp like that if there's danger. So they know, they're telling any humans that are around, okay, there's no giant predators nearby, because they won't chirp if that would be the case. So it's sort of reassuring for the humans, which I'm sure the early humans had that understood. And now I learned that when the sun comes up, the first sun, the horizontal sun, gives you a little burst of cortisol, just enough to get you moving, but also dopamine, not like a cortisol overload, but just enough to get you awake and going. And so I'm like, oh, I'm out there now for that horizontal light. I'm like, oh, I'm not missing that. And then if I get out early, I get to hear frog song, which I think is also probably, nervous system resetting. So, and I used to, when I had a dog, which you still have Tanner, I lost my Gretchen last year, but I used to do a walk when the sun was going down. And I have to think that was also nervous system resetting, just watching that sun dip down, and I would go in nature and walk around. So now that end of the day one, I have to find a way to structure that, in the same way. I also learned recently that you need total black dark by 11 p.m. where you're sleeping, because that's when all your hormones get restored. So if you leave your TV on or little lights on, it's not doing that the way it needs to do it after 11 p.m.
So I like what you're speaking on, as far as, everybody's going to find the structure one way or another. It doesn't have to be a cookie cutter.
No.
To find some sort of structure and a way to regulate your nervous system so that you can step into these more fuller expressions of trust, right? Learning Pisces and trusting that there is a divine intelligence that's moving you.
Yes. And sometimes, for some people it's art expression. They see it, they feel it when they're doing something artistic, because they realize things are flowing through them. So yeah, I'm really all about, I'll ask general questions. So that's where the B.E.I.S.M structure comes in. I can say, well, how do you commune with the all that is? And people know what I'm talking about. Then I don't have to get all technical about what I'm talking about. And they could have, a lot of different ways of doing that. So yeah, I work with all different kinds of people. I have some very conservative Catholic type people, and some kind of witchy people, and some, people that used to be in structured things, but now they're not. And the container, the B.E.I.S.M container, works for anybody, because it's generic, in a good way.
So as with all your clairs, and we have, again, this approaching solstice energy on June 21st with Jupiter in Cancer for the year, which is all about safety and security. What do you recommend? What advice would you give to those watching, and now or whenever is the perfect time to work with this energy? Because from what I understand astrologically, the solstice, it begins a cardinal point. It begins summer, right? So it's initiating a new frequency in the summer months, which is more heat. Things are moving quickly. And so, but there's so much energy right now, because again, we've never seen Neptune conjunct Saturn in Aries, which is going to be squaring this. And astrologically, that means something needs to shift or change. They call that, in some astrology circles, the hard aspect, but I call it something needs to move or shift. 90-degree squares is like you've been sitting on a chair too long and your legs are falling asleep. You got to move, right? You got to circulate the energy.
Right.
So there's energy that needs to be circulated between Saturn, our planet of structure, Neptune, our spirituality, and Aries, which is like the warrior, the spiritual warrior. And it's challenging us in these measures, these energies of security, which is very Cancer. So what do you see or feel how we can be best navigating these by really tuning into our spiritual practice? Again, learning Pisces. And how do you see that playing out within the collective, the world stage, and just from who you've been working with? Like, what are you seeing that people can utilize or awarenesses people can harness during this time?
Well, I feel like people are putting a lot of energy into being frustrated about things they can't do anything about, which is a big, not so nice, really, to identify which causes you would like to be part of, to support, to for the larger picture. Okay, this is for the big picture. Like maybe you want to work with getting rank order voting, or getting term limits in Congress, or maybe you want to work with getting people registered to vote. You got to pick something. Get the energy into something positive.
You're
Take
passionate about, right?
yeah,
Passionate.
something you're passionate about, and you feel, something that you could show up for the meetings and do the admin and all the not fun part. Something that you could commit to, and then say, okay, good. I'm doing this one thing or this two thing that I have the ability to do. And then we don't spend a lot of time on stressing over all the things that we can't do anything about. That doesn't help. It just makes you tired and gives you stomach issues. So we're not doing that. All right. So now security, personal security for me. I've lived, it's been me in spirit since 2016. In 2016, I started doing intuitive work. In 2018 was the last time I worked for someone else doing anything other than, guidance, counseling, psychic energy work, blah, blah. I honestly will tell you, I have not earned all of the money that has come to me doing the work, but I've had a couple of unexpected windfalls that have carried me to here. In terms of security for me, I try to engage in prosperity practices that I know generate material comfort. That would be not being a hoarder, moving stuff out of my house that I'm not using and sharing, keeping things moving, not letting things sit. If I'm not using it and it's not useful to me, let it go to someplace else. I do a lot of affirming of, I have enough, I am enough, I do enough. I have messages all around about, sort of the safety and security things. And I'm also really open to allowing the universe to support me in ways I might not anticipate. Like I really wanted this fence in my backyard, and these people said they would do it and they never did it. And I was angry and resentful about it. And then I said, oh, you're never getting a fence if you keep maintaining that resentment. And I dropped that. And maybe 9 months or a year later, a man came to my door in, my house and said, hey, I want to knock down the house behind you, and I'd like to put this giant, huge industrial garbage can in your backyard. And my neighbors wouldn't let him do it. And it was going to save him a lot of money if he could take down his own house. So we negotiated. I said, okay, you can do that if you make sure I have an intact fence in my backyard at the end of the thing. So he ended up spending some money on my fence, but far less than he would have had he had nowhere to put that garbage can, and he was continuing to get fined for a condemned house on his property. I also needed dental work a couple of years ago. I went to Mexico for a couple of weeks, and it was a bit of an adventure. I don't know this dentist. My friend had been there one time, but I know the universe wants me to take care of my body. This was the door that seemed to be opening. And I stepped through it. I had 3 warnings ahead of time, 2 precognitive dreams and 1 warning, about safety issues. So anything that was going on, I was well prepared for. And I had angels and helpers all around me the whole time. So, I had built a relationship with somebody who happened to be living in Mexico and had been to a new dentist and liked her. That was not like the normal way people get dental work. But I believed and had faith that I was supposed to get this dental work done. So my money went further there. And so that's what I did. So, sometimes, and I feel like you have to stay close to the now moment, to deal with security and safety issues or sanity issues. You have to stay in this now moment. Am I safe right now? Do I have enough money for today?
Yeah.
One time years ago, I made an offering to my teachers, and they asked me, do you have enough money? Well, I was living on a shoestring, no child support from my child's husband. It was nip and tuck. But for today, just for today, I had enough money to make that offering. And I said, yes, I do have enough money for this offering today. Yes, I'm doing this. This is what I feel like I'm doing. So, I feel like I try to be open to abundance from the universe and, any way it wants to appear to me. And I try to pay my bills. I don't try to not pay my bills. I try to always meet the contracts that I've already signed up for, pay them and pay them as soon as I have the money. Don't wait. I pay them as soon as I have the money to pay them, they're paid, because that creates more momentum, in that house. And in terms of, physical security, I lock my doors at night. I don't leave my doors open when I go to sleep at night. I do leave my house open a lot. But, I'm just, I try to be, I think practical and sensible. And, I'm very careful with my resources because I want my time. I want to be able to make choices with my time and energy. So the material resources that come to me, I feel are very precious because I don't want to be spending my time doing things to get money rather than the things I want to be doing. So, and I pretty much, I have to say, was extremely fortunate that even before I got in the woo, most of the work that I did throughout my life, I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be there. I chose to be there. I invested in whatever it was that was going to feed my soul and help me learn new things and put me in an environment where I felt like I was of service. And I do honestly feel that I have created some merit. There's some merit from that I when I need something, somehow it ends up getting taken care of. Is it stressful at times not knowing in advance how it's going to get handled? Yes, I've had stressful moments, but it's always coming back to, are my needs met for today, and staying in the now. And what do I want to put out to the universe today? What are the things I want to contribute? What do I need to receive from the universe? And I need a nap, maybe right now, like I have nap time these days, and just staying in that little structure of, I'm giving to the universe, I'm receiving from the universe, and not getting too far ahead of myself. Because if I were to think, like, if somebody had said, would you like to have, 3 or 4 years of, I don't know, I probably would have said, no, I absolutely don't want that. Don't give me that. But do I like what I have on the other side of 3 or 4 years of I don't know? Yes, I like it very much.
It's like the sacrifice. Everything has a cost, has a price. And, it's interesting as we're moving into this deeply unknown phase of humanity where we don't know. We're looking at the astrology, especially with Venus still in Taurus right now, matters of safety, security, home matters. Again, Jupiter's going to be expanding these things for the next 12 months, especially root, foundation. And I love that you said too, you never go, one of my practices is I don't go 24 hours to advanced. I don't think about things I have to do within 24 hours because it does create that sense of panic. It's like, well, if I don't have this, and the mind just starts getting all entangled with things that from the past. And like you said, if you're in the now, well, you do a checklist. Wait a minute, I've got everything I need right now. And I trust, again, the language, how you speak on your reality, I trust that everything will be provided to me if there's a need, with grace and ease, right? And so that's also been the practice for me, living a nomadic lifestyle. Like we talked about this, I think of like the fool in the Tarot, you're just stepping off the ledge and you're trusting
Right.
that something's going to catch you. And I've been playing this game with myself of, playing with money and not money. And can I live? How can I trust that if I am being divinely led to my purpose and this is what I'm supposed to be doing, then I just over time and experience show me, okay, I'll be provided for. And I kind of had to set that up for myself. I had to kind of, in surrender, say, okay, if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, astrology, metaphysical astrology, just being myself, getting paid to be myself, then I'm just going to trust the process, and whatever the consequences, so be it. Right. And you almost have to get to that stage of, think of Aries too, Saturn and Aries, that courage. And I feel the universe rewards the courage. Like a child is like, I'm going to do it. And, like the grandparents are like, oh, she's doing it. Right. And things show up magically in a very Piscean way, unknown. But there is this cosmic thread that we are all moving through, that we're all connected by. And if we can just trust that the universe does have your back, even if you don't see it, even if the mind won't let you see it, because again, old programming, we just left Jupiter and Gemini, a lot of mind constructs that, and Jupiter in Cancer is dissolving, and it's getting into feeling like I know, that this divine intelligence that also grows that rose in the rose bush is also growing something inside of me. And so it's a practice. Again, Virgo, it's all about the practice. It's not about the perfection, even though sometimes Virgo likes to try to be perfect. I've got 10th house Virgo in my midhaven, right? So, but then that if you wait for things to be perfect, you'll be stuck in those loops. That's, again, an insanity type of frequency that I feel a lot of us are coming out of, right? And if you're stuck into that loop of consciousness, maybe you can take some of these tools today. Again, don't going over 24 hours, being in the present as much as you can, and practicing trust, because it is a practice. So trusting, and I trust you very much, your psychic abilities. We were just talking about this before the conversation. I would invite you to, if you wanted to, Kristin, if you're called to, maybe whoever's watching this now, we'll set the intention that you receive exactly what you need to receive in matters of security, of home, of feeling that security as we're approaching this solstice energy. Again, the light is going to be at its pinnacle, its apex. We're going to the brightest light, if you're in the northern hemisphere here in the United States anyway, that we're approaching the most light. And then at that solstice point, now we're going to be heading back towards the dark. So it's not going to be as light. So I'm almost seeing the sun is really illuminating, especially in Cancer, because it's going to be conjunct, excuse me, the sun and Jupiter. Again, expanding what we see in matters of security, of connecting to that inner know, that foundational root. Is there anything you wanted to share? Maybe if you wanted to.
I do have something I want to share that happened this week that was so sweet. I've been pretty diligent with my practice, because we just had Sagadawa in Buddhism, which is big holiday, the birth of the Buddha, the enlightenment of the Buddha, the parinirvana of the Buddha. So it was a lot. And I was like, oh, what, let's try to keep this going. So I was meditating a couple of days ago, and this is so Cancerian, and things to do with my mother. Old feelings related to my mother came out. And when I was little, my parents got divorced when I was 5, and I lived with my mom, and we lived in this duplex. It was quite nice. It was in a residential neighborhood, and my mom was nice enough to give me the master bedroom, because I had all the toys and messy, and she didn't want that like everywhere, but it was still cool because I had this great room. But I was often worried about her, and I carried this feeling like a sadness, because I knew she wasn't happy, and I could not help her. And I was like, oh my God, you've been carrying that since you were 5 years old. What is that? And I just had to go visit that small Kristin and say, you know what? It was, you couldn't have helped her because you were little, like it was nice that you wanted to, but it wasn't a deficit, that you couldn't help your mom at that time. But, and then you look what I've spent my entire life doing. I have made myself into, in our thing, we call it skillful means in Buddhism, skillful means, I've made myself into a remarkable, person that can help. I can help in so many different ways, all those jobs I did, all those human service jobs, interfacing with all these systems, and then, coming into the woo. Recently I got the hypnosis certification because I want to do more past life regression. It's like the sky's the limit. But, we want to be motivated as helpers and healers by what brings us joy and
Mhm.
pleasure and is a good energy exchange for us, at the points we are in now, not from feeling like we have to do something because there's some part of us from childhood that is still like unresolved, and I'm like, oh, that's great. And in fact, I'm going to be working this weekend, and I wasn't necessarily planning on working this kind of an event right away, now. But last week I started missing it. I was like, oh, I need people. I'm going to see if they'll fit me in the event, because I just want to be there. I just want to be part of that vibe. And so that's good. That's a good sign, that I'm showing up there because it's really my jam, and not because I feel like I need to be showing up there for whatever unresolved thing that, I wasn't able to help my mom. But for me, and that's like that shining light, that really brilliant light was shining all the way back down into those years, at that duplex where she was lonely. She was a single divorced mom, no adult companion, carrying a lot of the responsibility and suffering, and a lot of suffering. And so I was feeling all of that, as she was, as I was with her. And I really did want to help her somehow. And I just, I couldn't really do it at that time. So, and of course, it wasn't my job. And what's so funny is she hates me to try to help her now. She's a Capricorn and she hates it when I suggest things and stuff. I have to be so zip, zip, zip. Just I have to wait for her, invitation on anything. So
You're actually making a really important point too. Going back to issues of safety and security really does land in childhood, right? Our foundation, our root. That's fourth house matters. And we were just talking about before this full moon in Sagittarius was a very potent full moon we just came off of, and now we're moving again into this new moon frequency with Cancer, with the moon being in Cancer again, conjunct Jupiter. So this could be the time to really go and talk to the inner child, right? And maybe do that work, that past, regress. Because sometimes in childhood, I've noticed I've blocked things out. I don't remember all the things that happened in childhood, but it would come up in spurts. And I found that it would come up in ways when I could finally handle it, when I was ready. It's like my soul agreed, like, okay, I'm ready to deal with this karmic, pattern, whatever, wherever I learned it or inherited, whatever lifetime. When you're really ready to do the work and to agree to go there, there's great reward and comfort on the other end of it. But you got to go through it. You can't
yeah,
bypass it. You can't.
yeah,
You got to
you
go
got to
through it.
feel it. You got to feel it. Yeah, you got to feel the feelings that didn't get felt. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
So
will
maybe do you?
honor you. I want to honor you for doing this kind of work. And, at the core of being a guide to people who lead, heal, or see, we have to keep ourselves in the juice. The main way that we remain vital and relevant, forget about any marketing stuff. I'm talking about the real inner juice that makes us have something to offer ongoing as time goes by, is continuing to do our own growth and development. And so that's our healing work, our learning, our skillful, means that, refining our skill sets. And some of us are just really down for it. We're just like, yeah, let's do this. And I see you as one of those people, Ella Eve, that you like to stay in it like me. I just need to feel that the vibrancy of feeling that I really am connecting with my soul timeline,
Yeah.
and the more I feel that, the better everything goes in my life, and I can let go any of the little nuances of weirdness that might appear here, there, and everywhere, because the big part is okay. And I'm so fortunate that, early, many years ago, like Chloe was maybe 7 or 8 years old, 7 or 8, and she's going to be 30. I found a psychic, and that psychic person was who I went to when I was trying to work things out in my life. And, I got the 411 that, yes, you are on your soul's path. You're doing the right stuff. You're on mission. And then many years later, I heard that again from another psychic, and she's like, you've really helped a lot of people. You've done a lot of good work. And then the messaging was something like, you're going to be so creative that you're not even going to recognize yourself. This was a while ago. So now I'm kind of coming into that phase, I think. And then a few years ago, before I went and got my dental work caught up, and I've been doing more things to take care of my own physical form. One of someone that's had a near-death experience that gets a lot of really clear messaging was like, oh yeah, you've done a lot, la la la, but what do you want for yourself? What do you want for yourself? And I started thinking about that. What do I want for myself? Don't be a martyr. Easy to be a martyr. You don't need to do that. Okay, what do you want for you?
Yeah.
So then, when I did go to Mexico to get my teeth fixed, which I did want to do, I also took a week and went to play, and, went to Tulum and the Mexican Riviera and looked at art and ate food and, swam in the water, so I started trying to do my best to build in, more, what does Kristin Avatar want? Because the clock on Kristin Avatar is ticking fast now.
Yeah.
At 61.
It's so interesting you said that, because when I was a single mom for years, I would actually go to a psychic for my therapy.
Yeah,
First of all,
absolutely.
Anne-Marie Monfadden, she was an amazing psychic. I actually went to her when I was in Florida, Ybor City, and I came across this psychic cafe, and there was different readers there. And she was the one that had like very short hair and almost looked like a librarian, had just very, almost very, I felt she was Virgo, right? So,
yeah.
there was different readers there with different presentations, but I was the one who's like, I want the little librarian, because I just felt, I've got Virgo 10th house. I'm like, I feel like she'd be more practical. I'm ready to go out there. I need somebody who's going to ground me.
Right.
My therapist, if you will, for 20 years, all throughout, me raising my son as well, because she was affordable. She only charged, $40 an hour, which she gave so much. And she ended up being one of my guides and my mentors. Right. So I can definitely relate that sometimes I would rather, and for me too, because I've got Scorpio 12th house moon conjunct my Mercury. I didn't trust nobody for nothing. I was like, what are they trying out of me? And a lot of the times I felt like I knew more than they were. And I'm like, I'd see their shadow. I'm like, I can't even get help, But with this particular being, it was integrity, right? You look for those that have that integrity, that can hold that, whatever form. I don't care how many degrees you have. If you don't have that integrity,
yeah.
Right. So I think we're moving out of that too, of needing to have so many degrees and this and that.
Yeah.
Some people into with gifts. Right.
It's good to have, what I like about the academic thing is not the degree per se. It's the critical thinking skills. It's learning the scientific methodology. It's having to, create a cohesive storyline based on some research that you did. It's the thinking processes that you get trained in that are useful. You can learn that without being in those environments. Does it happen as often? Not so much. So, for me, Buddhism is very scientific, like our teacher says, do the practices and then see what happens. At one point, I had more time when I moved out to the country, when I was on their property, and I said, oh, I have more time to read books. And she said, don't read too many books. I'm like, oh, interesting,
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about getting things intellectually, as we know. Okay. The information is just one of the little bandwidths. And then when we bring in the rest of the spidey senses, and this is something I say constantly when I do readings. In fact, I should just do a video of just this. We have our gut has all that intelligence. Our heart has intelligence. All of our senses have the regular perceptive ability and the spidey abilities. So there's all these other ways of knowing, and we like our little intellect, but that's one little bandwidth, and the intellect doesn't get to decide where we're going. The intellect decides how we're going to get there, which is very different. You know, an intellect with not good direction is not a nice thing. So, you know, the direction needs to come from the all that is, and the integration of the information that comes through in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm happy that I got, you know, I had the training that I had. Um, and I sometimes wish, you know, like I'm sort of envious of some of the men who have the more harder degrees, because they're more, you know, they have more play in the spirit science, you know, global stage, whatever. And if I had to do it again, I probably would study neuroscience. And there are women now who are coming behind me who have both the mindfulness practice and a degree in neuroscience. They're like 37, you know, or 42, you know, and I'm 61. So
But
I'm
if they
out.
didn't have the way showers, the elders, to show them what was needed.
Well, I know
Yeah.
that I was a path carver, yeah. And you know, when I think about the way birds migrate, you know, you have people that fly, the birds fly at the front and then they drop back and let somebody else fly at the front, and they cycle like that so that they can, you know, somebody's not always the one cutting through the, you know, edge. And now this happened couple of years ago, I was doing an event in Orlando, and there were some young women who had a booth next to me. They were herbalists, and they were also connected in with the psychedelic therapy world. And they were like, they were not more than 30, you know, and they were probably under 30. And I'm like, oh, I can just relax. These chicks have this, you know, I can just like do what I want to do now. I don't need to be doing anything that doesn't really appeal to me, because look at all these young women coming behind me that are going to move, you know, science and spirituality to the next levels. And I just don't have to work too much. I don't have to overwork, like, which would be easy for me to do with 4 planets in Virgo. So
What do they say when you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life?
that's true. I mean, I feel very, very fortunate, and that is one of the things that I identified very early, because I saw like how much my people worked. My people were into work, and I
Yeah.
thought, well, if I'm going to work that hard, I want to be doing something I like. You
Yeah.
know, and so I don't think I ever worked the crazy hours that some of my relatives worked, thank goodness. Maybe once or twice, but not ongoing, because I wanted to stay healthy. I wanted to do other stuff. I wanted to meditate. You know, I knew from the beginning I wanted to do things other than just that. And so I
That's
didn't.
funny you mentioned that, because I'm actually having to resolve that within me right now. I didn't realize how much of a workaholic I was until I stepped into a lifetime where I actually got rewarded more for doing nothing, or at least the appearance of doing nothing. And I guess it's that Wu Wei, right? The art of doing without doing. It's been such a practice for me, because the mind, again, I was taught value, the harder your work, the more you're valuable, the more you're wanted, the more, again, my dad was Virgo too. So, you know, you get rewarded for hard work, right? You get rewarded for putting in that time, that sacrifice, right? And then,
Yeah.
but where we're going to, that doesn't make any sense anymore.
Well, it
Right?
doesn't make sense even in even in the 3D. It's not happening now. Okay,
Right.
those years are gone. You know, when there used to be a contract between the company and the employer, and the employee was rewarded for the loyalty, and they retired and had, you know, comfort in their senior year. That's all done. There's, you know, if you're retiring now or almost now, this is the last ones that's happening to. You know,
Yeah.
those days are finished. So
You know, AI is coming and taking a lot of these jobs. So what they're saying now, the new trend is for the highly creatives, because you can tell when something's nobody wants the perfect. The AI sort of written content or book, you know, is becoming mundane. It's actually, people are looking for the imperfect, which I find it so interesting how things are shifting, especially with the advance of technology and Pluto and Aquarius, right? It's only speeding up. So the more that we can slow down and be in our bodies and allow ourselves more of that be-ism, right? Just to be, I feel like you get a lot more, first of all, joy and health and presence. There's just a lot more to life, I feel, and I think, and I know, by slowing down and not having to rush to work so hard at things anymore. I feel it's, we're coming out of that. That's that South Node, right? Virgo, we've done that. But we're here to do North Node, which is Pisces, which is more of that being. So I wanted to invite, because I wanted to honor everybody's time, and I know we're wrapping up. can you pull a card, or maybe for the collective, anybody that's here that's watching that is drawn to this channel? First of all, I want to thank you guys so much for being here, participating in this conversation
Should we
with
do a
Chris.
soul? Should we look at the soul? Should we do soul card? A card
Whatever
for
you
the
feel.
soul?
I trust
Yeah,
whatever you
I'm
feel.
feeling like, okay, so the message of, how can we reconnect more with our soul?
For the solstice, for the
For the
soul.
solstice. Yeah, that's good. Soul for the solstice. Yeah. And yeah. Okay, so I generally use this baking bowl. I call this the baking bowl of belief. I have 3 decks in here, all by James Wanless. One is an updated tarot for the 21st century. One of the decks I use is all nature, after the Green Man studies. And one is kind of a quirky, fun deck called the White Squirrel deck. I also call that the Just Do It deck. So I think what's happening, for many of the people that have been on the path, like you and I, for a while, we are, more zeroed in on who we are going to help. But I think we're also, expanding, like in this personal way, into more of the beingness, more into holding space for the future and operating in a quantum, more of a quantum kind of zone, for creation. So, what our lives look like might be a little different. Even like, Pamela Gregory is not doing one-on-one consultations. She's only teaching now. And, so many of us are shifting more into teaching and guiding, more people, with less time. Because there's a whole nother level of people behind to do the one-on-one stuff. They're coming, they're right behind us, which is like reassuring to me, at least, like, okay, everything's going to be all right. Just chill. You don't have to. Yeah. As a seer, from a young age, I was taking the path less chosen. And it's only in retrospect, that I can see why. Like, my dad wanted me to work in corporate America because I like nice things. And I was like, I got nothing there. I was totally not attracted to that.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't my soul path.
I just heard the glorious signum of spirituality.
Okay, so this is a very interesting card. We're getting, for our soul path, we're getting orgasm.
Oh.
Okay, so, orgasm is, this is a very transcendental state. When you're having an orgasm, you're out of your ego. Okay, you are completely out of your ego. You are unified with the all that is. And your ego drops out just for a little bit. So, how can we move into more of a, this is a repeating message to me right now, cultivating joy and ecstasy. So, because this vibrational field is extremely powerful and transformative. So, as far as holding space in the quantum, the more people that can be in an ecstatic, open, egoless state more of the time, the better it is for, doing this, transforming or alchemizing of the lower energies, of the dark night.
Love that. And I think of, too, the ecstatic state, because we do have Saturn next to Neptune in Aries, and Aries is very primordial. It's life force, it's sexuality. And where we've been, it's also, in the field with Chiron, where we've been injured. We've not been able to express our sexuality because of the judgment, right? We're leaving the age of Pisces, which is tied into a lot of religious practices. And I'm not dogging religion. I'm just saying that there has been a lot of precepts and a lot of, you can do this, you can't do that, right?
Right. Yes.
Boundaries.
Yeah, but now I think it's not even about that. The new wave is really emanates from love. The new wave is love based. And, that is not confined to any particular prescription, in terms of those things. And, I know that if I do my practices, oh, Jana is sending a message. Orgasm card came up for me this morning from my Sacred Cycles deck. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Very interesting. So that is, so yes. So we're getting a confirmation from our soul.
Okay, so more orgasms, everybody that's watching.
Right.
You're on a
More
zone.
orgasms in all ways, in your physical body orgasm, in your heart chakra, in your crown chakra, just where you're completely stepping out of your avatar and dissolving into the all that is. That's the orgasmic state, to dissolve our over identification with our little avatar suits.
Don't the French call it too the petite
The small death, yes.
small death?
Petite mort,
Yeah,
yes. Yeah,
yeah.
because for just in fact, that's where, the tantric, sexual practices are, you're meant to maximize that opportunity to actually, transcend your ego, to be more conscious that you have an opportunity to transcend your ego in that now moment. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I mean, also hearing too, and we'll end it on this because it's just funny that they say that, not just male gender, but the whole storyline is how men are more honest after orgasms because they've surrendered their ego, which I think is funny. It's not just men, but women as well, right? It's like that surrender, that release, the dropping all the who we thought we were. We just basically died together. Or just if you get to be in partnership, or you're doing it by yourself, right? For those of
Yeah.
us that have been. So it just depends on how you're using the energy. But I like that concentrated energy. And I'm also hearing too, living more in bliss. Like Joseph
Yeah.
Campbell talks about follow your bliss, which is very much Aries also. We have to learn to find what ignites you. What is your passion? What makes you, get up in the AM and rise and want to do that thing that you're doing, right? That's also part of that orgasmic interplay with energy. I feel that we're being called to do more and more and more, especially with this solstice. So perhaps you want to do a ritual. We're just maybe connecting to the energy of orgasmic energy, whatever that means for you. Because again, the light's going to be the brightest next to Jupiter.
And I was getting getting a message coming from different people pulling cards, that joy has been coming through from the cosmos. So that's very aligned. The joy, the bliss, the orgasmic expansion is healing energy. Okay. That's a huge, so I guess Joe Dispenza has a thing where you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do in exercise is imagine a time where you just felt so much joy, so expanded, so happy. And then you keep holding that as long as you can so that you get better and better at holding that super expanded joy energy.
I'm gonna have to have you back on the podcast because we definitely have some more transits happening. Uranus, our planet of unexpected change, the nervous system, it changes signs every 7 years, so it's getting ready to go into Gemini. It's been in Taurus, which is the body, and so Gemini is about the mind. So maybe I can invite you back, Kristin, to explore, how we can really integrate these new energies, these new frequencies by managing the mind. And you've done such a great, you've been really committed to your practice, again, Buddhism, and your practices to help regulate that. And so I'd like to invite you in for just maybe another conversation on how, as we start, people are really going to start expanding and seeing how the mind really influences our perception in this reality. So I just really want to thank you so much for being here, for again saying yes to the dress, for saying yes to this conversation. And I hope that everybody that's watching again found value. And if you liked any of the content, I'm going to put Kristin's information below so you can reach out to her. Kristin, what's the easiest way for people to contact you if they want to explore more of this B.E.I.S.M, more of these practices, techniques that you offer? How can people reach out?
My website is mindfulseer.com. I'm Mindful Seer on Facebook. You can messenger me. My phone number is 727-678-3761. You can text me. So I'm in Facebook a lot. So you can even friend me if you want, or messenger the Mindful Seer page. And my contact information is in the mindfulseer.com.
Thank you so much. Thank you for connecting. And thank you, everybody, for being here, connecting this channel. So much love for the solstice energy. Go have some orgasms or orgasmic, an orgasmic life is what I heard. Let's go experience our highest and best timeline right now. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, Jana, for participating in the live chat. Yeah. And we will see you guys next time for the next cosmic conversation on Livzenastrology. So much love, family.
Thank you, Ella Ivy. Peace and happy.
Peace and happiness.